Hail Internet, it's Matt here for the Dork Lords. If you're new to the channel, welcome. We talk about all manner of dorkly things here, so whether it's sci-fi, fantasy, superheroes, we probably have a playlist about it. Feel free to check us out. Today is another in our Dork Lord of the Rings segments. And before we get to today's topic, I thought I'd give you a little update on the Amazon series. They recently had a large casting announcement. They brought in 13 actors. They haven't actually said what parts those actors are playing. But when I looked over the list of names of the actors, the one that caught my eye was Nazanin Baniadi. I know her better as Claire from Counterpart. We covered that show on Dork Lords. It's a fantastic show. Short-lived, it was only 2 seasons, but it was great. And she was fantastic in it. So I don't know what that means necessarily for this series, but it just tells me that they are making smart casting decisions. She's a fantastic actress, and I think the show would be lucky to have her. So thumbs up on that. All right, so today's topic is actually brought to us by commenter Robin Vandevleckert. I apologize if I mispronounced your name, Robin. Robin wanted to know about the Eagles. First of all, we're going to give you a little history of the Eagles. Then we will talk about the controversy of the Eagles, which is that whole, why didn't they just use the Eagles to take the ring to Mount Doom? And we're going to finish off with what I found during this research, which is the most entertaining letter that Tolkien ever wrote. It's great. Anyway, I was so happy to find it. So anyway, that comes at the end. All right, here we go. First, let's give you a little background on our Eagles. The Eagles are originally messengers for Manwe, king of the Valar. Kind of like one step below Iluvatar, essentially. I'm going to read you a couple passages here from the Silmarillion describing Manwe and his relationship to the Eagles. Spirits in the shape of hawks and eagles flew ever to and from his halls, and their eyes could see to the depths of the seas and pierce the hidden caverns beneath the world. Thus they brought word to him of well nigh all that passed in Arda. All right, so his eyes and ears are the eagles. It says spirits in the shape of hawks and eagles. So we're going to talk here in a second what that might represent. I think they are cousins in a way of, say, the Ents, in the way that they're not necessarily Maiar spirits, or certainly not Valar, but they are this kind of another subcategory of spirit that are servants of the Valar. So before the elves awaken, we've got this passage here that I'm about to read where Manwe is talking to Yavanna about his eagles. And Yavanna says, hey, you know what? I'll make these giant trees, and that can be their eyries. They can nest there. But Manwe has other ideas. So here we go. Before the children awake, there shall go forth with wings like the wind the eagles of the lords of the west. Then Yavanna was glad, and she stood up, reaching her arms towards the heavens, and she said, high shall climb the trees, that the eagles of the king may house therein. But Manwe rose also, and it seemed that he stood to such a height that his voice came down to Yavanna as from the paths of the winds. Nay, he said, only the trees of Aule will be tall enough. In the mountains the eagles shall house, and hear the voices of those who call upon us. But in the forests shall walk the shepherds of the trees. So there you see this connection. The shepherds of the trees are Ents, and so the fact that he puts them in the same paragraph to me suggests that kind of in the taxonomy of spirits, our eagles fall into a similar vein as our Ents. And obviously they're ancient, right? These are around before the children come awake. So our main eagle of note, our named eagle in the First Age, is Thorondor, king of the eagles. He plays such a major role in so many storylines. It's impressive. It really is. So I'm going to recount for you now some of the ways in which Thorondor has an impact on the First Age. Starting out, Maedhros. He's one of the sons of Fëanor. He's been captured by Morgoth, and he's been hung up, chained to the side of the cliff at the mountain of Thangorodrim. And the elf Fingon finds Maedhros chained up, can't reach him. And Maedhros begs him to shoot him, put him out of his misery. And as he contemplates doing a mercy killing, Manwe answers the call. Here's that passage. Maedhros, therefore, being in anguish without hope, begged Fingon to shoot him with his bow. And Fingon strung an arrow and bent his bow. And seeing no better hope, he cried to Manwe, saying, O king, to whom all birds are dear, speed now this feathered shaft, and recall some pity for the Noldor in their need. His prayer was answered swiftly, for Manwe, to whom all birds are dear, and to whom they bring news from Middle-earth, had sent forth the race of eagles, commanding them to dwell in the crags of the north, and to keep watch upon Morgoth. For Manwe still had pity for the exiled elves. And the eagles brought news of much that passed in those days to the sad ears of Manwe. Now, even as Fingon bent his bow, there flew down from the high airs Thorondor, king of eagles, mightiest of all birds that have ever been, whose outstretched wings spanned 30 fathoms. And staying Fingon's hand, he took him up and bore him to the face of the rock where Maedhros hung. All right, so there's a lot there. First of all, the fact that, as we mentioned, these eagles are messengers for Manwe. So Manwe sent them out as spies, essentially, to Middle-earth. And they're spying specifically on Morgoth. So they're hanging around Morgoth's territory, keeping tabs on him for Manwe. And in this moment, he feels pity for the exiled elves and sends Thorondor to save Maedhros. And I love that Tolkien is actually very specific about the size of Thorondor. He says, outstretched wings spanned 30 fathoms. That's 180 feet. I looked it up. It's roughly the same size as a B-2 stealth bomber. That's huge. So Thorondor saves the day, saves Maedhros, but he's not done. Not at all. One of his other achievements of note is rescuing the body of Fingolfin. Fingolfin the elf has this amazing duel with Morgoth. I've recounted it in another video. Alas, Fingolfin loses and he is killed. But as Morgoth is about to just throw him to the wolves, here comes Thorondor. Morgoth took the body of the elven king and broke it, and would cast it to his wolves. But Thorondor came hasting from his eyrie, and he stooped upon Morgoth and marred his face. The rushing of the wings of Thorondor was like the noise of the winds of Manwe, and he seized the body in his mighty talons, and roaring suddenly above the darts of the orcs, he bore the king away. So he actually, in the process of rescuing Fingolfin, scars Morgoth's face. It's not an easy feat to do. Check plus on his list of awesome deeds. Another of Thorondor's amazing achievements involves the fall of Gondolin. In fact, there are 7 gates that guard the entrance to Gondolin. And one of those gates, I believe it's the 4th gate, the Gate of Withered Iron, actually has a likeness of Thorondor at the top of the gate in honor of our amazing eagle. But when Gondolin falls, and you've got the refugees, including some of the royal family, leaving secretly out of Gondolin, they get ambushed. And it's Thorondor who comes to the rescue. There was a dreadful pass, Cirith Thoronath it was named, the Eagle's Cleft, where beneath the shadow of the highest peaks a narrow path wound its way. Along that narrow way their march was strung, when they were ambushed by orcs, for Morgoth had set watchers all about the encircling hills, and a Balrog was with them. Then dreadful was their plight, and hardly would they have been saved by the valor of yellow-haired Glorfindel, had not Thorondor come timely to their aid. Many are the songs that have been sung of the duel of Glorfindel with the Balrog upon a pinnacle of rock in that high place, and both fell to ruin in the abyss. But the eagles, coming, stooped upon the orcs, and drove them shrieking back, and all were slain or cast into the deeps, so that rumor of the escape from Gondolin came not until long after to Morgoth's ears. Then Thorondor bore up Glorfindel's body out of the abyss. So, not only did Thorondor rescue the body of Glorfindel, like he had done with Fingolfin, but he also saves the day. It's not just a Balrog there that's fighting. As Glorfindel handles the Balrog, there's an army of orcs, and it's the eagles that basically push him off the cliff and keep those spies from reporting back to Morgoth, allowing the escape of these folks. One of those folks that escapes is little kid Yarendil. He's 7 years old, I think, roughly at that time. Obviously plays a huge part later, and he is able to escape due, in part, to Thorondor and his efforts. Thorondor also rescues Beren and Luthien after they steal the Silmaril from Morgoth. Flies in, flies out, rescues our heroes. And one other thing I'll note about Thorondor is his role in the War of Wrath. It's the war that ends the First Age, takes down Morgoth, and there's this moment in the battle when Morgoth releases his secret weapon, winged dragons. Out of the pits of Angband there issued the winged dragons that had not before been seen, and so sudden and ruinous was the onset of that dreadful fleet that the host of the Valar was driven back. But Yarendil came, shining with white flame, and about Vingalot were gathered all the great birds of heaven, and Thorondor was their captain. And there was battle in the air all the day, and through a dark night of doubt. And eventually Yarendil takes out Ancalagon the Black. But interesting there that it's Yarendil, right? So it's the little kid that Thorondor saved, eventually fights with Thorondor in this giant battle. And that War of Wrath is about the last that we hear of Thorondor's exploits. His name shows up periodically as the lineage of eagles, but I believe that that's his last recorded act in the mythology of Middle-earth. In the Second Age, you've got some mention of eagles in reference to Numenor. When Numenor is considering attacking the Valar, Manwë sends these eagle-shaped clouds over to Numenor as kind of a reminder of the Valar. Doesn't really work so much. It scares the citizens of Numenor, but then makes them think, yeah, those guys are terrible. We should attack them. Other than that, there's not a whole lot mentioned about the eagles in the Second Age. So we come to the Third Age, and we've got the Great Eagle in The Hobbit. We also have Gwaihir in Lord of the Rings. Many people think that's the same eagle. But I'm going to show you that actually there's a good case to be made that these are actually two different eagles. Could they be the same? Yes. But there's a couple of lines that suggest that perhaps these are maybe brothers or cousins, descendants of Thorondor, and not actually the same bird. So we start with The Hobbit. It comes earlier chronologically. So the Great Eagle in The Hobbit has a few exploits. One of those is he saves the company from the fir trees, right? The orcs have set fire to the fir trees. All hope is lost. And the Great Eagle flies in and rescues them. And then we have some passages here in which Gandalf is talking with the Great Eagle, and we learn some more about him. The wizard and the Eagle Lord appeared to know one another slightly, and even to be on friendly terms. As a matter of fact, Gandalf, who had often been in the mountains, had once rendered a service to the eagles and healed their lord from an arrow wound. So that's an interesting bit of backstory, right? Gandalf has, at some point, used his powers to heal the Great Eagle. Another passage by Tolkien when he writes, "Eagles are not kindly birds. Some are cowardly and cruel. But the ancient race of the northern mountains were the greatest of all birds. They were proud and strong and noble-hearted. They did not love goblins or fear them." And this next passage is really interesting too, because it shows why the eagles aren't taking the company of dwarves all the way to Erebor. So kind of similar to what we're talking about in Lord of the Rings. Why didn't the eagles take say the fellowship to the mountain. And so here's their reasoning for not going all the way to Erebor. They dropped them off on the Carrick instead of taking them all the way through Mirkwood over to Erebor. The Lord of the Eagles would not take them anywhere near where men lived. They would shoot at us with their great bows of yew, he said, for they would think that we were after their sheep, and at other times they would be right. No, we are glad to cheat the goblins of their sport, and glad to repay our thanks to you, but we will not risk ourselves for dwarves in the southward plains. All right, so a couple of things there. One, they get shot down by humans. Two, they don't really care for dwarves that much either, apparently. So that's why they're not wanting to fly over Mirkwood. They got the woodmen of Mirkwood would shoot them down. Gives you a little, thought as to maybe why the eagles are not being utilized in Lord of the Rings. And when they drop them off and they say goodbye, we get another little tidbit as to what the future holds for the great eagle. Farewell, they cried, wherever you fare, till your Ares receive you at the journey's end. That is the polite thing to say among eagles. May the wind under your wings bear you where the sun sails and the moon walks, answered Gandalf, who knew the correct reply. And so they parted. And though the Lord of the Eagles became in after days the king of all birds and wore a golden crown, and his 15 chieftains golden collars made of the gold that the dwarves gave them, Bilbo never saw them again, except high and far off in the Battle of 5 Armies. All right, so just keep that in mind. He becomes king of all birds, he wears a golden crown, and his 15 chieftains have golden collars. So there's no mention of, say, Gwaihir having a golden crown or having chieftains wearing golden collars in Lord of the Rings. Now, one of the reasons for that might just be because if they are the same bird, maybe at the time that he was writing The Hobbit, Tolkien wasn't thinking about Lord of the Rings, and so there's some differences there. Could be that if they're the same bird, maybe the golden crown comes after the Lord of the Rings, the events of the Lord of the Rings. It's possible. It's also possible that they're different birds. Just keep that in mind as we go forward. And I'll finish out here with the heroic entrance of the great eagle and his company to the Battle of the 5 Armies. Seeing the sudden gleam in the gloom, Bilbo looked around. He gave a great cry. He had seen a sight that made his heart leap. Dark shapes, small yet majestic against the distant glow. The eagles! The eagles! He shouted. The eagles are coming! Bilbo's eyes were seldom wrong. The eagles were coming down the wind, line after line, in such a host as must have gathered from the Ares of the north. And obviously they come in and help win the day in the Battle of the 5 Armies. And I'll note here an interesting connection. Obviously, when we see the eagles coming to the aid of folks, Gandalf is usually involved, right? They rescue them out of the fir trees. Come to the Battle of the 5 Armies. Rescue Gandalf eventually from Orthanc. They rescue the newly reborn Gandalf from the mountains above Moria. And they come to Gandalf's aid and help him rescue Sam and Frodo. And as I mentioned, they are Manve's messengers. Well, it's Manve who sent Gandalf to Middle-earth. He's the one that chose Gandalf in particular to go and help save humanity. So in a way, they're both servants of Manve. For instance, Saruman is a servant of Aule, which actually Sauron was as well once upon a time. Nice job, Aule. 0 for 2 on that one. But Manve chooses Gandalf. So it makes some sense, perhaps, that one servant of Manve is being saved by other servants of Manve. All right, so now we're cutting to Lord of the Rings, and we've got Gwaihir, the Wind Lord. May or may not be our great eagle from The Hobbit. I think I'm going on the idea that perhaps he's not. But okay, so this is the moment when Gwaihir comes to Orthanc and rescues Gandalf. He is sent there by Radagast, because there's a conversation Radagast has with Gandalf. Gandalf says, hey, I'm going to Orthanc to talk to Saruman. If you get any news, send one of the eagles along and report to me. Radagast is dutiful in that, thank goodness. And it's this eagle who's coming to report news suddenly realizes, oh, wait, yeah, Gandalf's been imprisoned. And so here we go. So it was that when summer waned, there came a night of moon, and Gwaihir the Windlord, swiftest of the great eagles, came unlooked for to Orthanc, and he found me standing on the pinnacle. Then I spoke to him, and he bore me away. How far can you bear me? I said to Gwaihir. Many leagues, said he, but not to the ends of the earth. I was sent to bear tidings, not burdens. Then I must have a steed on land, I said, and a steed surpassingly swift, for I have never had such need of haste before. Then I will bear you to Maedhros, where the Lord of Rohan sits in his halls, he said, for that is not very far off. All right, so that's interesting, right? Yes, there's the rescue, and that's very important. But also note how there's a limit to how far he can carry Gandalf. I was sent to bear tidings, not burdens. I'm going to take you to Maedhros because it's not that far away. Maedhros is it's about 100 miles, probably, maybe a little bit farther than that, away from Orthanc. There's a range, there's a limit to how far they can just fly, folks. As I mentioned, we also have Gwaihir rescuing our reborn Gandalf after the fight with the Balrog at the top of the peak above Moria. Gwaihir mentions he was sent by Galadriel to look for Gandalf. Which is a little odd because, Galadriel was told that Gandalf had perished, fallen into shadow. If I had to guess why Galadriel suspects that Gandalf may not be, in fact, gone, she is present when Frodo sees an image of Gandalf in the mirror of Galadriel. And I think he's seeing it like a Gandalf the White type thing. Perhaps she saw that same image and interpreted that correctly to mean, oh, wait, Gandalf his time in Middle-earth is not done, and so asks Gwaihir to go look for him. We then cut to the battle at the Black Gate, where indeed Gwaihir and his kin fly in to help save the day. There came Gwaihir the Windlord, and Landroval his brother, greatest of all the eagles of the north, mightiest of the descendants of old Thorondor, who built his eyries in the inaccessible peaks of the encircling mountains when Middle-earth was young. Behind them in long swift lines came all their vassals from the northern mountains, speeding on a gathering wind. Straight down upon the Nazgul they bore, stooping suddenly out of the high airs, and the rush of their wide wings as they passed over was like a gale. So here they come, and we mention that they are descendants of Thorondor. We have another name, Landroval, Gwaihir's brother. And we're about to get another name here when Gandalf asked them to take him to Sam and Frodo. Then Gandalf, leaving all such matters of battle and command to Aragorn and the other lords, stood upon the hilltop and called. And down to him came the great eagle, Gwaihir the Windlord, and stood before him. Twice you have borne me, Gwaihir my friend, said Gandalf. Thrice shall pay for all, if you are willing. I would bear you, answered Gwaihir, whither you will, even if you were made of stone. And he lifted up Gandalf and sped away south, and with him went Landroval and Meneldor, young and swift. So it's Landroval, Meneldor, and Gwaihir are flying off, and of course they end up rescuing Frodo and Sam. But here's the little line here that makes me think perhaps Gwaihir is not the great eagle. Gandalf says, twice you've borne me, thrice shall pay for all. Okay, well, the two times he's talking about are one, being saved from Orthanc, and two, being saved from the mountains above Moria. And this would be the third time. So he's not referencing at all the events of The Hobbit, which you think he would in that situation. And so that's not 100%. It's not like, oh, that's your deal breaker. Obviously, Gwaihir can't be the great eagle. But it is interesting to note that he doesn't say, oh, remember that all these times you've saved me? Well, try one more time. No, he's very specific. Twice. Here's the third time coming. And so on that somewhat less than compelling evidence, I would say that perhaps Gwaihir is a relative of the great eagle, but not the great eagle himself. And that leads us to this question. Why weren't the eagles used to drop the ring into Mount Doom? And the easy answer is, because the story would be 3 chapters instead of 3 books. But a little more in-depth answer might be, there's a few reasons. I'm going to read you in a second, I think, reasons that Tolkien had. But here's kind of the list of things that people generally bring about when they're talking about why perhaps the eagles were not used in this moment. When they keep showing up advantageously and saving the day, why not save the day this time? 1, remember how Gwahir mentions, I can only fly you so far. Hey, I'll take you to Maedhros because that's somewhat close. Okay, so that's like 120 miles or so, something like that. The distance between Rivendell, where the Council of Elrond was happening, and Mount Doom is about, it's been calculated by others smarter than me, to be about 1,350 miles. And so if we get the idea that the eagles can fly, say, 100 miles at a clip, unless you've got like a Pony Express, maybe the Eagle Express, where you fly 100 miles, hop off an eagle, hop on another eagle, fly another, there's going to take time. They're going to have to fly in sorties, essentially. So it's not just as quick as like, hey, we can be back this afternoon. Yank, done. So there's some time to it. Also, there is the sense that once you fly past the Black Gate, and you still have several miles to go to get to Mount Doom, you are wide open, and you're not supposed to be there. There's no eagles just randomly flying around in Mordor. Any one eagle, much less 3 or 4, would be very noticeable in that situation. And now you're incredibly vulnerable. Now, is Frodo vulnerable as well? Yes, but unlooked for. It's a lot easier to blend into the surroundings than if you're an eagle flying like, hey everybody, it's me. Put the big beacon, whop, whop, does not belong. Hello. So there's some inherent danger there as well. In a non-universe explanation, it's that this problem is for humanity to solve, right? This is not if the eagles just threw the ring into Mount Doom, the story itself doesn't have any meaning anymore. This is a moral fight. This is a fight for the morality of humanity. And if it's just accomplished by someone else, it robs the victory of really any meaning. So that's kind of a story structure version of an explanation for why the eagles don't just solve the problem for them. We're also not 100% sure what the ring would do. Would it corrupt the eagles? Are they corruptible in that way? I don't know. Maybe nobody did. Maybe that was a chance they weren't willing to take. But here I'm going to read you Tolkien's thoughts. And this is part of this, as I mentioned, this really entertaining letter. I'll explain that in a second. But first, let me just read you these 2 little passages specifically that mention eagles. What's happening is this letter is Tolkien's evaluation of a screenplay. A screenplay that was written back in the 50s, 1957. This guy, Morton Zimmerman, writes a screenplay as a proposal. And the proposal is for this mixture of animation and miniatures and live action. And he sends the script to Tolkien, and Tolkien hates it. Like, whoo! He has as strong a language as he can get for this script, which I'll read you. But amongst his complaints are how Zimmerman handled the eagles. Read you this real fast because it's pretty interesting. The eagles are a dangerous machine. I have used them sparingly, and that is the absolute limit of their credibility or usefulness. The alighting of a great eagle of the Misty Mountains in the Shire is absurd. It also makes the later capture of Gandalf by Saruman incredible and spoils the account of his escape. At the bottom of the page, the eagles are again introduced. I feel this to be a wholly unacceptable tampering with the tale. 9 walkers, and they immediately go up in the air? The intrusion achieves nothing but incredibility, and the staling of the device of the eagles when at last they are really needed. It is well within the powers of pictures to suggest, relatively briefly, a long and arduous journey, in secrecy, on foot, with the 3 ominous mountains getting nearer. All right, so let me break that down. So the thing where he says the eagles are a dangerous machine, I think what he's saying is like a deus ex machina, right? And he says, I've used them sparingly and to the absolute limit of their credibility. So he realizes, yeah, I've used them a few times. Battle of Five Armies, here they come. Hey, save the day. Gandalf stuck on Orthanc, yay, save the day. So he's kind of copying to the fact that he's used them at times as a convenient device. But he's used them as much as they can be used. And this guy has an eagle showing up in the Shire like, hey, everybody, hop on board, essentially. And it's interesting because then it says the 9 walkers, and they immediately go up in the air. The 9 walkers, we're talking the Fellowship, right? 9 walkers versus the 9 Black Riders. I think Zimmerman had the same idea as these people that have complaints about the Eagles. I think Zimmerman's script must be, hey, once the Fellowship is chosen, the Eagles take them to Moria. Like all that, the journey to Moria is just eagles going bloop and fly over. And you can see how angry that makes Tolkien, because he says he likes the idea that it's in secrecy on foot. And it's this journey, this arduous journey, which is at the heart of his story. And he doesn't want to cheapen it by having eagles just go boop, and then probably like, oh, the mountains are too high, we can't cross them, so we'll stop here and enjoy your trip through Moria. Anyway, so there you go. In Tolkien's case, I think he's saying the need for secrecy and the fact that he doesn't want to use the eagles to that extent. That's like one bridge too far for Tolkien, is to have them just drop the Fellowship off at Moria. I know this video is running a little long here, but I can't resist reading you some of these amazing passages of Tolkien's outrage having read this screenplay, which admittedly it sounds like a train wreck of a screenplay of The Lord of the Rings, and he's so angry. So enjoy with me now. Most of Tolkien's letters are interesting, fascinating, but they're usually academic, right? There's somebody asking him, what do you think about Frodo and the nature of free will, and blah, 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 and he'll write a response. This is not that, right? This is, you screwed up my story. How dare you? And if you want to see the whole thing or a good portion of it, it's letter 210. So if you look up Tolkien letter 210, you can enjoy more of this. I'm just picking out some highlights. Starts with they. He's referring to Zimmerman and folks who might be reading his response. They may be irritated or aggrieved by the tone of many of my criticisms. If so, I am sorry, though not surprised. But I would ask them to make an effort of imagination sufficient to understand the irritation and on occasion the resentment of an author who finds, increasingly as he proceeds, his work treated as it would seem carelessly in general, in places recklessly, and with no evident signs of any appreciation of what it is all about. Zimmerman has introduced a fairy castle and a great many eagles, not to mention incantations, blue lights, and some irrelevant magic, such as the floating body of Faramir. What the hell that is? He has cut the parts of the story upon which its characteristic and peculiar tone principally depends, showing a preference for fights. And he has made no serious attempt to represent the heart of the tale adequately, the journey of the ring-bearers. The last and most important part of this has, and it is not too strong a word, simply been murdered. So again, the journey of the ring-bearers, right? That's what he is focusing on as the paramount part of his story. Again, which belies the fact that the eagles would do the work for them. But yeah, they've murdered his story. This is great too. Seasons are carefully regarded in the original. They are pictorial and should be, and easily could be, made the main means by which the artists indicate time passage. The main action begins in autumn, passes through winter to a brilliant spring. This is basic to the purport and the tone of the tale. The contraction of time and space in Zimmerman destroys that. His arrangements would, for instance, land us in a snowstorm while summer is still in. The Lord of the Rings may be a fairy story, but it takes place in the northern hemisphere of this earth. Miles are miles, days are days and weather is weather. He's getting more upset as he goes through this thing. Rivendell is not a shimmering forest. This is an unhappy anticipation of Lorien, which it in no way resembled. It could not be seen from Weathertop. It was 200 miles away and hidden in a ravine. I can see no pictorial or story-making gain in needlessly contracting the geography. The Balrog never speaks or makes any vocal sound at all. Above all, he does not laugh or sneer. Zimmerman may think that he knows more about Balrogs than I do, but he cannot expect me to agree with him. It's just great because it's like, it's almost like a YouTube channel where they're like, you know, like the show isn't as good as the book, but in this case, it's the author actually doing the "you're terrible." It's awesome. All right, 2 more paragraphs here. Why do not Theoden and Gandalf go into the open before the doors, as I have told? Though I have somewhat enriched the culture of the heroic Rohirrim, it did not run to glass windows that could be thrown open. We might be in a hotel. So apparently there was some bit where they were throwing open some glass windows and like looking out and talking to each other. And yeah, he's like, what are you, in a hotel? What do the Rohirrim have, you know, room service and cable TV? Part 3 is totally unacceptable to me. If it is meant to represent only a kind of short finale, then all I can say is, The Lord of the Rings cannot be garbled like that. So there you have a pissed off Tolkien letting the powers that be know that he does not appreciate this screenplay of his. Makes me wonder what his reaction would have been to Peter Jackson's treatment. Who knows? So there you have it. Robin, I hope this answered your question about the Eagles. We learned a little about their history, learned a little bit about the controversy, and hear the awesome comments of an outraged J.R. Tolkien. Thanks so much, everybody. If you've got a topic you'd like me to do a video on, please put it in the comments. Be happy to do a video about a topic of your choosing. Thanks so much, everybody.